Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Julie Lynn. I am the political director here at Progressive Victory 2022. And we're super excited this evening to welcome the first of our partner presentations. This one, we're joined by Nicole Hobbs, the co-founder and executive director of EveryDistrict. And welcome, Nicole. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. So for those of you listening, we are live on the main stage in the Discord server. We are also live on Twitch. We may be live somewhere else. I don't know. I'm not the production genius on this team, but I am grateful to them and also grateful to Emma, our community manager, and Doug, our deputy political director. And for those of you who will have questions, which hopefully you will, we will be taking questions if you're in the main stage by raising your hand using the raised hand feature. And also, you can join our office hours chat channel, also located under voice channels, even though this is technically a text chat. And we will be doing our best to kind of staff all the various places where we can take your questions. So we're going to start with a presentation and then take questions after the presentation. So away we go. So why are we talking about state legislatures and why are they our first presentation? Great questions. So as you hopefully know by now, if you've been in the Progressive Victory 2022 server, you know that our political targeting strategy as how we can best make a difference for progressives and Democrats this midterm election is by focusing on a few key areas. One of those key areas is our state legislatures. Why do we care about state legislatures? And why is this presentation tonight titled The Critical Importance of State Legislatures and Why We Need to Flip Them Blue? So first things first, state legislatures are not that sexy when it comes to political races. Oftentimes, top of the ticket races like federal races, governor, president, those tend to get the most attention, airtime, money, donors, and voters. And the reality is that state legislatures, especially after clearly a far-right turn by our U.S. Supreme Court, state legislatures are really one of our last true check and balance on an ultra-conservative Supreme Court. And given the fact that, the entire U.S. House and half or a little over half of the U.S. Senate is up, the reality is that we need to protect every last Democratic stronghold we can. I'm so excited that Nicole could join us this evening because EveryDistrict is a great organization that's been around for quite a while now. How long has it been, Nicole?
5 years.
Okay, so 5 years. It feels like a lot longer than that, but then again, every political cycle feels a lot longer than the last one. But EveryDistrict has a very unique and critical role in the progressive and democratic infrastructure in our country, in that, in my opinion, they are the best, if not the only, kind of outside traditional Democratic Party, like our DLCC, groups that work to help progressives and Democrats understand what's happening in the state legislatures. How do we strategically target races and where our support can make the biggest difference? So EveryDistrict has done a lot of important work throughout the years to do the research, coordinate with the candidates, coordinate with the legislative caucus groups, and help kind of distill it down for the rest of us. So we are very grateful to Nicole and her team. And also, full transparency, most of their targeting and research has gone directly into our political strategy for these midterm elections. So Nicole, we're very, very grateful to you, and also grateful for the time that you're taking this evening. So just as a reminder, we're going to do a short presentation and then take questions. Nicole, anything else you want to say before we begin?
I think you covered it.
Okay, thank goodness. All right. So with that, let's see. Emma, did I give you the link to the presentation? Please tell me I did.
You did not. No, you didn't.
Okay. So Hold on one second. Carl, can you pop that link that I shared with you, the Google Drive link, in the office hours chat? So folks on the server, you are welcome to click on this link that Carl's going to put, and Emma hopefully will drop in a couple more times throughout the presentation. So if you click on this Google Drive link, you can follow along with our presentation at home. All right. So without further ado, Nicole, I'm going to turn it over to you, and here we go.
Great. Well, thank you, Julie Lynn. Again, so excited to be here with you all this evening. As Julie Lynn said, my name is Nicole Hobbs. I am the co-founder and executive director of EveryDistrict. Our mission, since we were founded in the very beginning of 2017, is to flip state legislative districts and state legislatures blue. So always happy to take time and talk about my favorite topic, which is state legislatures. And tonight, I'm going to talk through kind of 4 big themes. So the first being just to give you all an overview of where state legislative control stands nationwide, where Democrats doing well, where Republicans doing well. Then we will talk in a little bit more detail about why state legislatures matter, building on what Julie Lynn said in her introduction. Then I will talk about several of progressive victories' target states, especially where there's overlap with the states that EveryDistrict is working in this year, and talk in more detail about the opportunities there, and then end by talking a little bit more about what you all can do to help to get involved in these races. And as Julie Lynn said, this is going to be a short presentation. I'm really looking forward to taking your questions and having a back and forth discussion. So whether you have questions about something that I mentioned in this presentation, or maybe about a state or a district that we don't talk about, happy to talk about, take any and all questions when we get to that section. So with that, Julie Lynn, if you can go to the next slide. Great. And the next slide. So to start big picture, wanted to give you all just an overview of where things stand and a little bit of a quick history of party control in the states. So what this chart is showing is kind of after the past couple of recent elections, states where Democrats controlled both chambers of the legislature, states where Republicans controlled both chambers of the legislature, and then states that were split with one party controlling one chamber and the other party controlling the other chamber. So where we started right after the 2016 election was really a low point of Democratic control in the states, with Democrats only controlling 13 states fully. And as you can see in recent years, we had a little bit of growth where Democrats were doing a little bit better, putting some more states in that blue column. But then the past couple of years, we have seen a little bit of a step back, losing a couple of states, Republicans gaining a little bit. And so really where we are right now, we've seen some of that growth. Democrats currently have 17 states where they have full control of both chambers of the legislature, but Republicans are really still dominant, fully controlling 30 states. And Julie Lynn, if you go to the next slide. What we see here, just to put this in map form, is unfortunately a lot of red, right? This is right after 2016. This is that really low point in Democratic control in the states. So much red. And if you look, you'll see some states that you might not typically think of battleground states, like Washington State, like New York, that are in yellow on this map. Coming out of 2016, Democrats did not have full control of both chambers of the legislature, even in states that we think of as pretty blue. So really had a long way to go to build back that power starting in 2016. And then Julie Lynn, if you go to the next slide, what we see after 2018 is some good news, right? A couple more states that we were able to put in the Democratic column. So got Washington State, which actually that happened in 2017, but it gets here in the post-2018 map. Got New York, also Maine. That was one of those states in yellow on the previous map, flipped that fully to blue after 2018. Added New Hampshire to the fully Democratic column. added the Minnesota House to the Democratic column. But again, still seeing this sea of red. And what we saw in 2018 was in states like Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania that we're going to talk about tonight, in addition to a whole bunch of others. It was a pretty good night for Democrats. We flipped a whole bunch of districts blue in 2018, but we still weren't able to get those last couple of districts that we needed to get full control to win those majorities. And then Julie Lynn, if you go to the next slide.
Did I skip one? There we go. Sorry about
that. So showing what happened post 2020. So this was a year, and happy to talk more about this when we get into the Q&A if folks have specific questions about 2020. But this was a year, right, where Democrats were hoping to have a whole bunch more blue on this map, but unfortunately still seeing a lot of red. And actually what we saw in 2020 was the only chamber flips that happened, unfortunately, was New Hampshire going back to the Republican column. So really not the best night for Democrats in the states, which means there is still more work to do this year, which we will talk about. Julie Lynn, if you can go to the next couple of slides.
This is
Sorry about that. So before we dive into the opportunities this year, now that we have a sense, very broadly speaking, of the lay of the land, want to give a couple of examples to really illustrate why who we elect to state legislatures is so important. And if you go to the next slide, I love talking about Virginia, although I'm a little heartbroken about Virginia at the moment. But Virginia was really the biggest success story that Democrats had at the state legislative level coming out of 2016. Those of you who've been kind of super in the weeds on politics for a while may remember Virginia in 2017. Virginia has these kind of odd year elections, and Democrats came super, super close to actually flipping the state house that year, but they finished the job 2 years later in 2019. Democrats also flipped the state Senate in 2019, and with full Democratic control of the legislature, they accomplished a lot. So the new Democratic majority passed common sense gun safety legislation, ratified the Equal Rights Amendment, restored reproductive rights that Republicans had rolled back when they had been in power, expanded voting rights, raised the minimum wage, widened discrimination protections for the LGBTQ community, passed environmental protections, and decriminalized marijuana possession. And this is just a partial list. So this really gives a sense, right, when we elect Democrats, when we elect progressives to state legislatures, of the total sea change that can happen in the types of legislation that we see being passed at the state level, and the real direct impact that that can have on people's lives. But then on the flip side, Julie Lynn, if you go to the next slide, what we also see, right, is how whether you live in a state controlled by Democrats or Republicans at the state legislative level, can have a real fundamental impact on, what rights we have when we live in different states. And so many of you may remember, I think this was, an example of what happens in state legislatures really breaking through into national news, which does not happen all that frequently, though a little bit more frequently of late. But in 2016, this was when North Carolina passed its infamous bathroom bill, where you did see that national backlash in a good way with corporations, with activists, calling on the state to repeal that bill, which they did kind of, but not enough. But again, just really showing an example of the ways in which, what legislation is or isn't passed at the state legislative level, and the huge impact that can have on people's lives. And right, we see here in 2021, over approximately 400 anti-LGBTQ plus bills introduced in state legislatures across the country. And then again, just really kind of emphasizing this point, right? When you look at where LGBTQ plus Americans are and aren't fully protected from discrimination, right? We see so many states where we still have so much more progress to be made. And again, what we see right in the fully protected states, of those 21, 17 of those are the states where Democrats control both chambers of the legislature. And then we also add Virginia, New Hampshire, Minnesota, and Iowa to that list. So again, just really emphasizing how who sits in these state legislatures, who has control over what bills are or aren't passed, really has that fundamental impact. And then Julie Lynn, if you go to the next slide, of course, reproductive rights, which have been in the news since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June. And I apologize, I know this map is a little bit small, but for those of you following along, what you can see is the states that are in teal and yellow are states where access to reproductive care is protected for the moment. And then you can see that much larger group of states in the orange, in the red, and in the brown, where access to reproductive care is not protected, is being actively threatened at the moment, which is the majority of our states and all of the states that are controlled by Republicans at the state legislative level. And this election, right, really fundamentally important for access to reproductive care, with the Supreme Court putting that back to the states, right? This is an issue that until there is action at the federal level, right, we'll see if that happens, it is being determined state by state. And for those of you who want to learn more, this is a screenshot of an interactive map, and I've linked to the Center for Reproductive Rights. So if you want more information about what's happening in your state or another state that you care about, this is a really great resource to go and learn more. That's constantly being updated as the landscape is constantly changing. So I encourage you to check this out if you're looking for more information. And with that,
can I just add that additionally, as many of you know, reproductive rights are actually on the ballot in a lot of states. And this is something that is changing day by day. For instance, in Michigan, which is one of our priority states, they did collect the largest number of signatures in the history of ballot initiatives in Michigan, but then it went to a board, a bipartisan board of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans called the Board of Canvassers. And just late last week, the Board of Canvassers, the 2 Republicans stymied it, and they said it can't go to the voters in November. So now there is a lawsuit pending to the state Supreme Court, and we'll talk about the importance of state Supreme Courts on a different presentation, because those are in some states partisan offices as well. So whether or not that will go on the ballot in Michigan, TBD. So yes, we saw this in Kansas. We're seeing it in Kentucky. I believe, well, definitely Vermont, possibly Minnesota. Anyway, this is, yes, very timely issue. So thank you for sharing this. All right.
Yeah. So let's dive into talking about some of Progressive Victory's target states and where we really see opportunities at the state legislative level. And before I dive in, want to take a step back and just talk a little bit about how EveryDistrict thinks about districts, particularly this year. So Julie Lynn, you can go to the next slide. It's okay. So on these next couple of slides, for those of you following along, you'll see me talk about likely Democratic districts and lean Democratic districts. So these are districts that, based on our analysis, we feel kind of somewhat confident that we can put them in the Democratic column. These are places where Democrats are favored to win, and we're counting them that way. I'm also going to talk a lot about battleground seats. So these are seats that, coming out of redistricting, are the competitive districts that, whether we are able to win these seats, these are the make or break seats for building majorities in these states. And I'm also going to talk about how many seats away we are in each chamber from getting that majority. But you're going to see there's typically more battleground seats than there are kind of seats that we need to flip. And this is because some of the math, or really all of the math, has gotten a little bit complicated coming out of redistricting. So as many of you may know, earlier this year, almost every state went through redistricting, where all of the maps were redrawn, both at the federal level and at the state legislative level. So in all of the states that we are going to talk about tonight, right, the lines shifted, the competitive district shifted. So sometimes you had a new seat created that was actually a safe Democratic seat. Sometimes an incumbent got moved into a much more competitive seat. So it's created an entirely new landscape. But the goal tonight is to help you better understand what the opportunities are in the states that we're talking about. And then, of course, in the Q&A, if you have questions about other states, I'm happy to talk about that as well.
And can I just add a couple things? As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, when we were putting together our political targeting strategy for Progressive Victory 22, we almost single-handedly relied upon EveryDistrict because I have used it many previous cycles, and I know it's incredibly reliable and some of the best out there. So these next three states in particular, we are already doing work in, and you all have the opportunity if you've filled out the form, which maybe somebody could put the link in the office hours chat. If you filled out the form to volunteer through Bilal's organizing team, then you can help in these states. So I know we're doing work already in Arizona, and we have our Arizona state lead, Tyler, is with us this evening. And so you can go into any of these state channels to talk more about what's happening in this state, but also stay tuned in the announcements channel. You'll see announcements for the various organizing volunteer opportunities that you can join. So hopefully tonight, if you aren't already convinced the importance and how close we are to flipping state legislative chambers in these states, hopefully we will seal the deal on that, and then additionally convince you to not only help out, but call all your friends or text them and then get them to join us. So, okay, thank you, Nicole. Appreciate that. Take it away for about Arizona.
So to dive into Arizona, so as I said at the beginning, right, there are a number of states like Arizona where Democrats have made a lot of really good progress over the past couple of years, but fallen just shy of getting that majority. Arizona, unfortunate, perfect example of that, where Democrats are so close, they only need 2 more seats in the state Senate and 2 more seats in the state House to get that majority. In 2022, really where there is that opportunity in Arizona is to flip the state Senate. So there are 12 districts that we've put in that likely Democratic column, and then Democrats need to win 4 more battleground seats to get that majority. EveryDistrict has endorsed 3 candidates in battleground seats, and this will be a little bit of a theme, but you're going to see there's a wave of September endorsements that we'll be announcing soon, including Arizona Senate endorsements, where we will get to that 4th battleground seat. So again, kind of really good opportunity, really competitive opportunity where Democrats have a chance this year to flip the Arizona State Senate. The Arizona State House, even though we are so close, kind of given the way that redistricting played out along with candidate recruitment, what we are focused on in Arizona this year is holding on to what we have so we can build that majority in the future. And some of this comes down to the way Arizona's districts are structured. So in Arizona, there are 30 legislative districts, and each legislative district elects 1 state senator and 2 state house members. And what we saw in Arizona was only 1 Democrat running in some of these competitive districts, which unfortunately limits our opportunities a little bit. So that's why this year, really that focus is on the state Senate, ideally getting that flip there if we can, and holding on to what we have in the state house to build for the future. Julie Lynn, if you can go to the next slide.
And actually, before, so can I step on you here? Step on your foot here for a second. So one thing I mentioned again at the beginning was that oftentimes voters don't know about these races. And we know that when voters don't know or don't understand an issue or a race, their tendency is generally not to vote. And so, Nicole, I know this answer, but can you tell folks at home how close some of these races have been in terms of like, winning a seat versus losing a seat, and then ultimately how that affects the makeup of who controls the chamber?
Yeah, so several hundred votes, less than several hundred votes. I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but we'll talk about it now. In Virginia in 2017, there was literally a race that ended in a tie. And so basically names were pulled out of a hat. That is what they came up with to figure this out. So these races matter. And Arizona is really the perfect example, unfortunately, again, of kind of Democratic voters not being informed enough to vote at the state legislative level. And I'm going to get a little bit wonky for a minute, but having done a deep dive into what happened in Arizona in 2020, is what we saw at the top of the ticket was that Joe Biden won a majority of state legislative districts. So if every voter who had voted for Joe Biden had also voted for a Democratic state legislative candidate, we would have, full majority in Arizona right now. But what we saw was Joe Biden getting more votes than the Democratic state legislative candidates, showing that there were voters who voted at that top of the ticket and didn't work their way down ballot. So that's where this information is so important, right? If voters are motivated to send Mark Kelly back to the Senate because they want, access to reproductive care protected, well, then they also, right, need to vote for that Democratic state legislative candidate, because that's now an issue that's being decided by the Arizona state legislature. So yes, this information piece is crucial, and we unfortunately saw the kind of downside of the lack of information in Arizona in 2020.
Yeah, I will just say I had a friend run for state legislature in Michigan and lost by 4 votes. 4 votes. Talk about. I mean, I don't know if that's more or less frustrating than the tie, but yeah, oftentimes like you might not think that it like a single vote makes a difference because we're so used to thinking in terms of like presidential races in terms of millions of people voting, but sometimes you never know how many people aren't voting, which is scary. So really, every vote does truly matter. So okay, thank you for placating me there, and then also let's move on to Michigan. Speaking of Michigan.
So Michigan, another super exciting state. And this state is where Democrats have that double chamber opportunity, the ability this year to flip the state Senate and the state House. And what's really important about the state Senate is that Michigan state Senate districts are only on the ballot every 4 years. So this is our one chance for the next 4 years to flip this chamber. And Democrats do have a good opportunity to do that. So this is another state where we have come heartbreakingly close to getting those majorities in 2018 and 2020, but just kind of couldn't get those last few districts. So right now, Democrats only need to flip 4 more seats in the state Senate and 3 more seats in the state House to get those majorities. Now, Michigan actually, thanks to a ballot initiative that passed in 2018 in Michigan, Michigan had one of the fairest redistricting processes that we saw all over the country. There was this newly created independent commission that did a great job of actually creating a fair map. And so the pro of that is that Democrats are actually running on a competitive map, and there are a ton of competitive districts. The con of that is that there are a ton of competitive districts. And so really kind of the opportunity and challenge in Michigan is that you need a lot to go right. And there are a lot of those opportunities, both in the state Senate and the state House, for Democrats to get that majority this year. But you'll see when I talk about the numbers, definitely more districts in both chambers that are in play, more districts, where we need to get those wins in order to build those majorities. So in the state Senate, we've put 16 districts in the likely/lean Democratic columns, which means that Democrats then need to flip 4 more battleground seats for the majority. And there's a good group of, about 8 or 9 battleground districts. We've endorsed in 4 of them, with more endorsements to come. And then the state house is really where you see these kind of larger numbers come into play. So we've put 42 districts in the likely and lean Democratic column, which means Democrats then need to win 14 more battleground seats. So here there are about kind of like 25 battleground districts in the Michigan State House, a really huge competitive map. We've endorsed 3 State House candidates so far, with more to come. And also what you see in Michigan, this was a case with a lot of incumbents, some of whom had recently flipped districts and were in more competitive seats, but also some incumbents who are in a little bit of safer seats get drawn into those more competitive districts. So from our perspective, with our focus on fundraising, we haven't endorsed those incumbents who are in battleground seats. They've already got war chests, they've got lists of donors who they can tap to do their fundraising. Our focus is on the candidates who are, first-time candidates, haven't done this before, where that extra fundraising boost is really important for them. But again, just, Michigan, huge opportunity, but also huge challenge with these larger number of competitive districts. And if you can go, yeah.
And I just want to add one thing about Michigan is that Michigan has some of the most stringent term limits for the state legislature in the country. So this might at first glance seem like a good thing, and there is an argument to be made. However, I think, like some things, not all things, in moderation is good. So for instance, in the state house, in the Michigan State House, when you are elected to a 2-year term, similar to that of Congress. However, because of term limit restrictions, you can only serve 3 2-year terms. So if you think about that, and you're just you maybe spend the first 2 years getting the hang of things, then you've only got 4 more years. So we've got people in Michigan who are serving as the Speaker of the House, who have only, been doing their job for 4 years. So, and in the state Senate, they're elected to 4-year terms, and you can only serve 2 4-year terms. So there's an argument to be made for institutional memory and understanding, and really seeing consequences. So when lawmakers can see the consequences or the benefits of legislation they pass, it can have a profound effect on them. But if you haven't been in office long enough to see anything you've done, get passed into law, that can have a pretty big impact, and really kind of leave you short-sighted, especially if we could say that you're pretty conservative and short-sighted to begin with. So, but then again, the whole issue of term limits is also set by the state legislature. So, as they police themselves, right? It's kind of like Fox watching the hen house and whatnot. And that's the case in a lot of states that have term limits. So something else to keep in mind is kind of a consequence of state legislative elections. So, are we ready, Nicole, to go to Pennsylvania?
Great. So Pennsylvania. So here, the real opportunity is in the state house, where Democrats are 12 seats away from a majority. So this is, as you can see, right, the largest margin that we've talked about tonight. And the state Senate, also a number of competitive districts. The challenge with the state Senate is that only half of the districts are on the ballot every year. So this year, the even-numbered state Senate districts are on the ballot. And with Democrats needing 5 more seats to get that majority, there just aren't 5 competitive seats amongst the even-numbered districts. So the state Senate is really a kind of 2+ year play, where the goal is to win a couple of competitive districts this year, build on that, win a couple more in 2024. So as you can see, we have endorsed 1 candidate in a battleground district as part of that building toward that majority. But then in the state house, the Pennsylvania state house is a really big chamber, and actually had a pretty fair redistricting process, which was surprising because Democrats did not have a whole lot of leverage. But the map that we got out of it was not terrible, all things considered. So that was pretty useful in terms of thinking about the competitiveness of the state house and really giving Democrats some good opportunities this year. So there are 203 seats in the Pennsylvania State House, really big chamber. So that's why you see there are kind of these 91 likely lean Democratic districts, which is great. But then we still need 11 more of those battleground seats in order to get a majority. That path is pretty specific in terms of the number of districts that are competitive. There are, 11, 12, 13, 14 of them, depending on kind of how you slice it. And again, we will be announcing a couple more endorsements in the Pennsylvania State House on top of the 8 candidates that we have already endorsed. So, pretty specific group of districts that we need to make progress in this year in order to build that majority. But again, kind of with everything happening, everything in the news with Democrats being motivated, this is really a good opportunity where we can make progress in Pennsylvania. So with that, Julie Lynn, if you want to go to the next slide. So want to take a minute and talk about supermajorities, and specifically Kansas, North Carolina, and Wisconsin, which I know are states that Progressive Victory is working in this year, that really illustrate why supermajorities are so important. So these 3 states actually all have Democratic governors, but have Republican majorities in the state legislature. So if we take Kansas, so Kansas does have that Republican supermajority. And so what that means is that if the Republican legislature in Kansas passes a law that the Democratic governor vetoes, Republicans, because they have that supermajority, can override the veto and still have that piece of legislation become law. So in Kansas, we are only a couple of districts away from breaking the supermajority. So there is that opportunity there, specifically in the state house, which is on the ballot this year. The state Senate is not. And then on the flip side, what we see in Wisconsin and North Carolina, again, states where we have Democratic governors and Republican legislatures, is Republicans have majorities, but not supermajorities in those states, which means that if our Democratic governors veto a piece of legislation, it dies there. Republicans do not have the votes to override that veto, which is really, really important for stopping some of the worst pieces of legislation that we have seen come out of these states in recent years. But unfortunately, Republicans are only a couple seats away from being able to build supermajorities in North Carolina and Wisconsin. So these are states where protecting vulnerable Democratic incumbents is really important, as well as reelecting Governor Evers in Wisconsin. And as a side note, in North Carolina, we're okay there. The Democratic governor was reelected in 2020. That election isn't happening again until 2024. But just wanted to take a moment to talk about supermajorities because I know that concept can kind of be a little bit confusing about why they are important and what role they play. But I think these states do a good job of really illustrating that point. And again, this would be a great thing to talk about in the Q&A session if you have more questions about supermajorities.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
And I will also say that New Hampshire, there's talk about New Hampshire in the officers chat. Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Kansas are all, all on our targeted priority list. So, yes, supermajorities are a real thing, and they're important, and also they're troublesome, especially when they're Republican supermajorities.
Yes.
Yes. So what can we do to help, Nicole? Tell us.
Great question. So if you go to the next slide, so everything you are already doing, the fact that you all you're here, you're listening, you're part of Progressive Victory, this is the first step in getting involved and making a difference. So as we already talked about, right, these races are decided by very small margins, from literal ties to 4 votes to, double digits, several hundred votes. So every little bit that you can do makes a difference. So whether you're donating, texting, calling, door knocking, and I know Progressive Victory is doing a great job of making it easy for you all to sign up for those opportunities. Any little bit you can do helps. And as we talked about with Arizona, right, there are kind of 2 pieces to this, which is making sure that Democrats who are showing up to vote know to fill in that entire ballot, which is so important at the state legislative level. And then also this year, right, talking to independents and Republicans who may be concerned about what they're seeing, whether it's just the general state of the Republican Party or reproductive rights, which is an issue where a lot of voters, right, we're seeing this in the polling, are upset about Roe v. Wade being overturned, right? These are voters who, in a lot of these states, we need to persuade to vote for our candidates in order to be successful. So doing all of those things is so important, and any little bit you can do will help. And right now, especially if you're kind of donating, getting involved, this is a critical moment for campaigns to be communicating their message. So budget-wise, campaigns are trying to make sure they can raise all of the money. So they have that for mail pieces, for digital ads. Some of the campaigns we're working with are going up on TV, especially if they're in a large district. So they need to make sure they have that budget complete so they can pay for all of these things because the bills are coming due. And then on the other side of that, right, we are past Labor Day. This is when voters are really starting to tune in to the election and paying attention. And so now is a really, really important time for voter contact to be having these conversations with voters about why these elections are so important. And then the other thing I will say that's really important that you can do, for your friends, right, within your own community, with your family, is encourage everyone to register to vote if they are not registered to vote. And then when they do go and vote, make sure they vote all the way down the ballot, not just voting at the top, but voting for all of those local races as well.
And I also just want to put a plug in that contrary to Republican and conservative talking points, Nicole is not personally funded by George Soros. So another great way you can help is to support organizations like EveryDistrict. They do rely directly on donations from folks like you and I to be able to spend the time and energy doing the research, reaching out to candidates, informing us as the public that care about issues like this, which candidates we should be investing our time and energy in helping get elected to have the biggest impact, and also, helping us make the case to you all as well as other voters why these races are so important. And so, Nicole, can you just say a little bit briefly about, besides the research that you do, you've mentioned that you endorse candidates, so can you just spend a minute or two talking about how that works and what that means?
Yeah. And so as I have here, for those of you who are following along to the presentation, there are over 7,300 state legislative seats all across the country. And so what we really see our role at EveryDistrict being is doing the research on those districts so that you don't have to help find, right, the couple dozen seats that can actually make a difference in these key battleground states. So very briefly, the work we do starts with kind of broadly researching states and districts to understand where we have opportunities to build majorities, diving deep into the states where we do have those opportunities to see, where are there enough competitive districts where Democrats could be successful in building a majority. And And then we reach out to the candidates who are running in those districts. We send them all a questionnaire. So all of our campaigns are vetted, right? We want to make sure these are people who are committed to this race, who are running competitive campaigns. I've worked on campaigns, so I know what campaigns need to do to be successful. So we're making sure that they have comprehensive campaign plans. And then throughout the year, stay in touch with our campaigns to understand what their needs are, and particularly on the funding side, right? Which candidates are pretty close to meeting their budget goals, and which candidates could use that, additional support to be able to hit their budget. Maybe they're a first-time candidate, maybe they don't have, a super large personal network. So that's where we can really help be a gap filler and making sure that all of our candidates can run fully funded campaigns. And I will say, if you go to our website, which is everydistrict.us, you can find more information about our target states and our candidates. So poke around, and there's lots of ways to learn more and get involved there.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. All right, now we'll go on to the next screen. Oh boy.
This is the last slide.
Oh,
so
the
now
last
we're
slide. Okay. I was like, why isn't it going?
That's why.
All right. Okay, so we're going to stop sharing if you're following us on Twitch. And we apologize that we had some issues earlier, but we are back online. And so that was awesome, and that was a lot. And Nicole, as always, so grateful to you. So thank you so much. So yes, want to put a plug in top lines here, folks. State legislatures are very important. They're way sexier than everybody else makes them out to be. They're way more, in my opinion, more directly impactful on our daily lives. You saw all the legislation that Virginia was able, like progressive legislation that Virginia was able to pass in just a short time when they were able to regain control of the Virginia State Assembly. In the Commonwealth states, we call them assemblies. In the rest of the states, they call them state houses. Fun fact. And also, these seats can be won for considerably less money than they can, say, federal races like congressional. I'm sorry, Doug just quoted me in the office hours chat, saying state legislatures are extremely sexy, in my opinion. Thank you, Doug. Yes, they are, Doug. They are. So they can be won for considerably less than, say, top of the ticket races like gubernatorial races, congressional races, things like that. I will say here in Vermont, where I live, an expensive state legislative race would cost about $3,000. On the flip side, when you live in California, which I forget how many districts there are in the state house there, but I do know that their district size is bigger than their congressional, some of their congressional districts, so much more expensive. But then again, most things in California are. And then there's kind of everywhere in between. And really, if you think about it, when somebody runs for a state legislative race, it does take a tremendous amount of time and energy. And so when they make that commitment to run, it is a huge commitment. It's a commitment on their time. It's a commitment on their family's time, their free time, right? Like, you are working extremely hard for every vote you can get. So I would just say, if you are in a position to donate $5, $25, $100, whatever, to a candidate, my suggestion most times is to give to a state legislative candidate, because your money's going to go a lot further. And Nicole already outlined some of the things that candidates have to spend money on. And also, those races, like I said earlier, do more directly impact your daily life. So if you identify as an LGBTQ plus person, if you identify as a person of color or a person with disability, or a person with a uterus, or something that makes you not a cis white straight male with privilege, then chances are your life is more directly impacted by the laws that are passed at the state legislative level than not. So things to keep in mind. Okay, anything else you want to add before we start taking questions? And folks,
No, I'd love to get to questions.
Yeah. Okay. So, folks in the main stage, if this is your first time joining us, so there is a raised hand function, and I'm going to call up our fabulous community manager, Emma. Emma, can you just remind folks how they
Howdy.
can find that and what they need to do?
Yes, at the bottom of the screen, you should have a raised hand button. And once you've raised your hand, we'll call you up and you'll be up on the stage and you can ask your question.
And on the flip side, if you are in the office hours chat on our Discord server, you can ask your question in the office hours chat. And then if you're on Twitch, Emma, can I ask? I don't think we can ask questions on Twitch, but okay. And Doug has informed me that he is staffing the Twitch chat. So thank you, Doug. Okay. While we wait for Wayward Traveler to post his question, we do have one from the office hours chat. So this is from Condon Spark in Michigan. And hold on, I have to do what Carl told me so that I can highlight it so that we can put it on. We can put it on Twitch as where we're streaming. So Condon Stark asks, are we able to donate to Progressive Victory 22 and allow them to spend on campaigns? Because I'm willing to donate $10 monthly to help the organization, but I won't have time to go to each specific campaign. Great question. So at this point, Convin, the answer is not yet. However, what we're doing is we're encouraging folks to donate directly to the candidates and that we are supporting. And we will have ActBlue links, which is the online mechanism to give to those candidates. And so that'll be coming soon. I would say if you want to donate right now, you could go ahead and donate to EveryDistrict because your $10 will absolutely go to those candidates that we've talked about in those states. So it's rare for somebody to say, don't give me money and give it to somebody else. But in this case, we are all allies in the same fight. And we absolutely, I can tell you that if you give to EveryDistrict, it's going to go to our candidates that we are jointly supporting. So great question. And Wayward Travel was, Nicole, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to jump in and say, so yeah, if you go to our website, everydistrict.us, you'll see opportunities to give directly to EveryDistrict. So we love our monthly donors. If you want to just set that up, we would be so appreciative. And we do give directly to candidates from that pool of dollars. So your money is supporting them there. And if you want to donate directly to candidates, cut us out as the middleman. You'll find that ways to do that on our website as well. So we have lots of ways to kind of donate and get involved, however is easiest for you and whatever is your preference.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicole. You can also give $5 to the candidates and $5 to EveryDistrict because they're still putting money into the research. So we need that research. No, I'm not getting paid by EveryDistrict or Nicole. I'm just a big supporter. Okay, so Wayward Traveler was able to ask their question in the office hours chat. Their question is, hello, is there going to be an ongoing list of campaign numbers to plug into Impactive? So campaign numbers, can you kind of clarify, Wayward Traveler, what you mean by text banking and canvassing? Yes, absolutely. So when you, as we put in the announcements chat, in the events chat, these phone banking and text banking opportunities, yes, you can absolutely go in there and when you help out those candidates, those are the candidates that we're working directly with in those states. So yes, that's a great way to do that. If that was not your question, please clarify and we will come back to it. So, okay, Emma, do we have any other questions in the main stage?
Not at this time.
Wow, this has got to be a new record. So y'all are usually have tons of questions. Okay, so actually I have a question for you, Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned I'm gonna act like I haven't worked in politics for 27 years here. So but I know this is a frequent question. So um, most people's understanding is that every 4 years we have elections, and those happen on even number years. But you mentioned a couple states that had odd number elections. How many states have what we call off-year elections, and who are they? I feel like this is like a little bit of a Jeopardy question, but I know you can handle it.
Yes. So there are, well, here's a fun fact. State houses are up every 2 years in even numbered years with 5 exceptions. And so those 5 exceptions are Virginia and New Jersey, which are our odd year friends. So Virginia and New Jersey have elections. So they had elections in 2017 and 2019 and 2021. So their state houses are up every 2 years in the odd years. You also have Mississippi, which is every 4 years in an odd year, and Louisiana, they're also an odd year. And then the North Dakota House, they flip-flop. So half of their state house is up 1 year and half of their state house is up the other year. I will need to check and just confirm that they're not doing something a little bit different post redistricting. But those are the 5 state houses that you will not find on the ballot this year in 2022. And then I won't do the whole list of state senates because those vary, but you got a little bit of a flavor of that tonight, where the Arizona State Senate, that's every 2 years. The whole Arizona State Senate is up. We talked about the Michigan State Senate, so that's all up this year, but once every 4 years. And then the Pennsylvania State Senate, another example of a state senate that does the flipping of half up, which is actually fairly common amongst state senates. That
just keeping in the theme. Yes, and just in keeping the theme that all 50 states and the territories and DC all love to be individuals and different, and they like to keep us all on our toes. So yes. Thank you for that.
Depending where you live, you will most likely have a state house race on your ballot, unless it's one of those 5 exceptions, and then state senate, and who knows.
Yes, great question. So it turns out we have a lot of questions in the office hours chat, so I'm going to take a couple more from there. Actually, this one is from Twitch, from Bamasrad. And so the question is, how might the Moore v. Harper decision affect our ability to turn state legislatures blue long term? And so if you are unfamiliar with the Moore versus Harper Supreme Court decision, Nicole, do you feel like you can answer that question?
This is the independent state legislature doctrine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So from the SCOTUS blog, someone was kind enough to link to it. So I'm quoting from the SCOTUS blog website here. It says, the issue, whether a state's judicial branch may nullify the regulations governing, quote, the manner of holding elections for senators and representatives prescribed by the legislature thereof, and replace them with regulations on the state court's own devising, based on a vague state constitutional provisions purportedly vesting, oh wow, it's getting really wonky, the state judiciary with power to prescribe whatever rules it deems appropriate to ensure a fair or free election. Do you want to try and translate that for us? Knowing that you are not a constitutional law scholar, and we do not expect you to be one.
Have not gone to law school. I'm not a constitutional law scholar. Do not remember all that much from the one constitutional law class I took.
No worries.
Yeah, the easiest way to boil it down is that Moore v. Harper is very scary. Like the implications, this would be, I don't even know how to put it into words. Like it would just be such a fundamental change that like yes, the ability to flip state legislatures blue would change, and so would like all of our election laws. So this is definitely a case to be watching closely, especially with this Supreme Court that doesn't really seem to put a lot of weight onto precedent in the way that they are supposed to. So there would yeah, we'd be in whole new territory where certainly our ability to flip state legislatures could change based on how they actually decide this. You know, this should be just like thrown out, right? This should not be allowed. It would fundamentally change, free and fair elections in this country. But we will see what happens.
We will see. And even more reason why we need to make sure that we can hold our state legislatures to act as the check and balance, as the founders designed our lovely system to be the check and balance against the federal Supreme Court. So, yes. Okay, Emma, do we have any questions in the main stage, or can we go back to the office hours chat questions?
I think we're good to go back to the office hours chat.
Okay, so I just want to remember, if you are listening in from the main stage on Discord, please feel free to raise your hand. We'd love to hear someone else's voice besides our own. I'll just
actually, there is Crooked. There is Crooked.
Great.
We could get Crooked up here.
Let's go. Yes, please.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes,
yeah,
welcome, Crooked.
Welcome. And I'd like to say I really appreciate all the work you guys are doing. This whole community is amazing. It's incredible how much has been accomplished in such a little time, and I really appreciate the leadership.
Thank you. It would be pointless if you weren't here. So thank you, and thank you for making it possible. Yes. What's your question?
Okay, yeah. So after all the compliments, I'll give you the question. How do you guys feel about ranked choice voting?
Oh, okay. Nicole, do you want to go first, and then I'll go?
Yeah. So I think ranked choice voting is super useful in certain situations, right? We just saw Alaska, where that was a great example of ranked choice voting being used to very positive effect. I've used ranked choice voting, especially. I'll kind of give this away and say I used to live in a very blue area and did ranked choice voting in an election where it was basically only Democrats who were going to be elected, which was, I think, a really exciting use of that. So I'd certainly like to see more ranked choice voting. I will say my only kind of slight hesitation with it is that it does involve a lot of voter education. Working on campaigns, you see just how hard it is to get certain people to show up to the polls. And so I think that's the only thing that we really need to keep in mind is that where we are implementing it, we need to make sure it's not a deterrent to people participating in the process because they kind of feel overwhelmed by all that is entailed in ranked choice voting.
Yeah, it can be kind of difficult to explain. And the reason I brought this up is because I'm a member of Ranked Choice New Jersey.
Nice.
Yes, we focus on, of course, ranked choice voting. And one of the things that has always come up is kind of how to basically re-educate people on how to vote in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of issues that come with that. But there actually is a independent game developer who has made a game called First to 51. And it's supposed to be sort of like a casual game version of ranked choice voting.
Cool.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
And also,
Yeah.
I do want to say for the people out there in the audience who think ranked choice voting is great, many states have their own version of voters' choice where we get together each week or so and we determine how to spread the news about ranked choice voting. So I'd recommend looking into your state. And if your state doesn't have one, maybe even look into starting one up.
Awesome. Thank you, Crooked. I will also say that there is a bill in Congress that has been introduced to make ranked choice voting the not default, but to make ranked choice voting what we use at federal elections. They are working on a bipartisan effort to get support from both sides of the aisle to get this passed. Where we have seen ranked choice voting, as Nicole has mentioned, New York City mayoral elections. Weirdly, the state of Utah. I rarely hand out praise for Utah, but go Utah.
With ranked choice voting, you might have more praise for them.
Right, exactly. We've seen it in Alaska. Of course, that helped defeat Sarah Palin. So two 10 fingers and all the hands for Alaska. Different places like that where they are using it, and there's a number of state legislatures, who have also introduced bills to use ranked choice voting. So there is momentum. It is slowly but surely. But yes, thank you for bringing that up. That's a great point. So awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Crooked. I'm going to go back to the office hours chat because we have a couple more questions, and we'll kind of bounce between the two. So, Carl from Twitch, just FYI, we're going to take a question now from the office hours chat. So somebody was asking if there are possible progressive seats in the Dallas-Fort Worth, i.e. Texas area, and how can they help? And Doug already answered this in the office hours chat, but for those of you listening, so Nicole, you look at all 50 states, but because of scarcity of resources and efforts and things like that, you kind of prioritize the races, like the states, just as we do here. And so, do you see Texas ever being on your list?
Yeah, great question. So we did work in Texas in 2020. And like most, or unfortunately all, I should say, of the states we worked in 2020, didn't quite make as much progress in Texas as we wanted to. And I think Texas is a good example of an unfortunate combination of factors, which this is a great question to talk about, in that Texas is a state where geography plays a really important role. So this year, the chances of flipping the Texas legislature, I would put at pretty slim, unfortunately. That's not to say there aren't competitive seats, right? And certainly metro areas, suburban areas, of which Dallas-Fort Worth is one, places where there are, certainly, I am sure, some type of competitive district that I don't know off the top of my head, but Doug has hopefully maybe put a district number in the chat. But in Texas, right, I would rate like Beto's chance of winning the governor's race, which I would still say is not super high, but we've certainly seen a lot of momentum there, right? Much higher chance of that happening than the state legislature flipping. And in Texas, we see both a coming together of geography, where just even under a competitive map, you'd still have, big swaths of red areas trying to draw, more competitive districts that can make it challenging. And then Texas's redistricting process, perhaps not shockingly, was not the best for Democrats. It's definitely a skewed map, a Republican-leaning map. So some of those more competitive districts that we saw in 2018 and 2020 have become a little bit more red.
Yeah. Yes. Very, very true. Great point. All right. Emma, do we have any other questions in the main stage?
I think that's it.
Oh my goodness. Y'all are surprising me because normally we have more questions than we can get through. Okay. Do we have any other questions from Twitch? Oh, we do have a question in the office hours chat.
GOP's Nightmare.
Right. Yes, GOP's Nightmare. Great username, by the way. All right, so their question is there any movement on proportional representation instead of districts in any state legislature?
Eileen, no.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was thinking about that and I was like,
Yeah. I mean, that's not to say there aren't like a couple state legislators out there maybe introducing bills here and there, but not a big movement to my knowledge.
Yeah, I don't, I mean, there could be many reasons for that, right? Like, you basically have to redo the entire system and then figuring out. And also, if I'm guessing, remembering correctly, in many states' constitutions, the current system is written into the system, and to overhaul it would likely require a constitutional amendment, and in some cases, a constitutional convention. Which, if you've never heard of one, it's because they're extremely arduous. They take a lot of time and money and effort. There, I think, was a great West Wing episode about a constitutional convention. If I recall, I'm dating myself now. But essentially, it doesn't happen very often because it's meant to be such a high bar to clear. So that is a great question. Yeah, thanks. Emma just called me a boomer. The West Wing reference, and now I feel so old. Okay, we're gonna move on.
I got the reference, so I don't know.
Okay,
Maybe
thank
it doesn't
you.
help me. And just a note on constitutional conventions. I would not want to see a constitutional convention right now.
Yeah.
Because while I've established that I am not a constitutional law scholar,
Got it. Yes. Same.
there's been talk about Republicans kind of trying to do one, which would allow them to like rewrite things and skew it in their favor, given the control they have at the moment. So this would not be a time for us to do a constitutional convention. It could have disastrous. Yeah.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. And if any of you, God, now I feel like I'm going to get called out again. There's a great magazine called The Atlantic. And The Atlantic has sometimes some really good pieces. And a while back, if you go to The Atlantic and like search for constitutional convention, I remember they did a great article about like why it is such a big deal and how, how high the bar is and yada yada. So yes, that's a fascinating thing. I actually don't think I've ever lived through a constitutional convention, but I've constantly heard chatter. But you're right, because like if the Republicans are controlling the governor's office, the state legislature, things like that, it's not to the Democrats' advantage to try this. And if you are #nerd alert, like me, and you were in like debate or student government in high school or college, there's this whole parliamentary procedure and Robert Rules of Order. Also seen multiple West Wing episodes. And there are, there's a lot of kind of power plays that you can do in an elected body to kind of get control. And it's sneaky, like there's that's a whole nother minefield. So yeah, interesting stuff. And I see that Doug, it's late here on the East Coast. Doug has added in the office hours chat a link to an organization working on proportional representation. It's called fixourhouse.org. So thank you for sharing that, Doug. And Kanban Spark had another question in the office hours chat, and that was in regards to, he says, what is your, sorry, just lost the question. What is your opinion on the Electoral College being proportional to the percentage of votes instead of scrapping it all together? Okay, so Kanban, I'm just going to flag that this is not directly state legislative related. And so this is a bit of a football and not softball that we're tossing out to Nicole. Nicole, do you want to answer this question or should we just skip ahead? It's okay.
So, yes, I know about this.
Okay, great.
I know things. So this would be like the National Popular Vote and the National Popular Vote Compact, which would be the easiest way to get rid of the Electoral College. And actually, I don't know how to share a link with you all, but I'll figure this out because this is something that every district has some musings on. But and to date myself, this is something I've been working on for a dozen plus years, kind of on and off in different advocacy ways. But yes, there would be a way to get rid of the Electoral College to have a national popular vote. And basically, if you Google National Popular Vote Compact, it's a compact that if enough states pass, so basically enough states to get to that electoral vote majority, then all of those states in the compact are agreeing to just give their electoral votes to the winner of the popular vote. So the winner of the popular vote would always win. And therefore, basically, the Electoral College would be moot, which I fully support. I think it would be better if we just elected the popular vote winner and got rid of the Electoral College and all of the shenanigans that we saw around that. And this is another reason why state legislatures are so important, because this is something that has to be passed by state legislatures. And so if this is something that you care about, making sure that your state has passed the compact is really important. And we did a report where we talked about like what is the path to passing the national popular vote. And there is no path to passing the national popular vote without flipping more state legislatures. And I think we had a little like interactive feature. I really need to find this. I'm going to look for it. While we're still chatting, because you could kind of build your own path to the national popular vote, which was really fun.
I love that. And we will share that when you find that. So I'm just going to give a time check. We're about 12 minutes before we have a hard stop. So we had a question from one of our Canadians, Cute Coco. Cute Coco has been very active in the Discord server, and we appreciate them for that, especially for being a non-American. But we love our Canadians for many, many reasons. So Cute Coco's question is, are there any fundamentals for organizing small races like these that can be translated to most areas?
Yeah, so I would say in terms of these races, what you are trying to do is organize, which is a really useful skill in a lot of different things that you would be doing. In terms of also, I would say, kind of the different facets of organizing, right? There's kind of getting people who you know are kind of with you or maybe motivated to be part of the same cause, but actually getting them to take that next step and be involved, right? That ladder of engagement. And so on a campaign, you might have a volunteer who kind of starts off giving a donation, and then maybe you ask them to help write postcards because that's an easy activity. And then you get them actually out, door knocking and having conversations with voters at the door and how you move them along. So yes, I think if you are kind of getting involved, if you're working on campaigns, these are great skills that will serve you well in anything else that you're doing. And I'm certainly biased, but I think there's like no better job than working on a campaign because it teaches you so much so quickly. And it's a great experience. So if anyone is thinking about, volunteering on a campaign for the first time, or like maybe getting more involved and going to work on a campaign, would highly, highly recommend that. I don't know,
Awesome.
Julie Lynn, you have extensive campaign experience. If you have,
I'll just say I feel like I've shared this several times, which is I did not when I volunteered in my first ever campaign, which shout out to current Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. I volunteered on her first ever state legislative campaign. It was a special election, which means it was not happening at the normal time of year. And it meant that we were knocking doors in snowy, cold March, which was not the best, not the best time. But that's how I, share my story of when I was 80 and we walked up a hill, both ways kind of thing. But when I did that, and my first presidential campaign was Howard Dean in 2004, I did not see myself working in politics as a career. But I got bit by the bug, and here I am 20-some years later. So you never know. But yes, and we'll be talking about relational organizing, which is having conversations with individuals, people that you are most likely to influence their opinion, whether it is to just vote, where they might not normally vote, or whether it's to volunteer for their first campaign. So you actually are the most effective tool to influence those around you and in your community. So keep that in mind. And we'll be working with a group and incorporating something called vote tripling, which is basically we ask you to triple your vote by asking 3 people friends, to vote, make sure they're registered to vote, and remind them to vote when it comes time to it. So we'll be doing, you'll be seeing a lot more around that. So awesome. Okay, Emma, do we have any more questions in the main stage?
No, doesn't look like it.
Okay. All right, Emma, I'm just going to wait for you to tell me that we do have a question in the main stage. Our office hours chat is quite active, so we're going to go to great. So actually, Emma has a question from the office hours chat. Thanks, Emma. And Emma's question. Do you want to ask your question IRL, Emma?
Which one is that? Oh, the how we get other members in the server to sign up for banking events?
Yes. So how do we get? I'm sorry, this is not for Nicole so much as just for folks if you're joining us from Twitch or aren't in the server. So if you go up to events, so right now we have 6 events listed. 5 of them are phone banking or text banking or canvassing events. And if you go into the state channels, so somebody was asking about Greg Stanton, who is running in Arizona's 4th congressional district. That race is a targeted race for Progressive Victory 22. We need to win that race. We need to keep Greg Stanton in office as a Democrat. And so where can I learn more about him as the candidate? And Doug appropriately answered, which is at the beginning of all of our volunteer events, you'll learn about the candidate, you'll learn about the district, you'll learn about the events, or excuse me, the issues that are important to voters in that district. So we will help you get trained up before you start contacting voters. And any good campaign will do that every time that you come to volunteer, no matter how you volunteer and where you do. So, great question. There's lots of chatter about, yes, there's lots of chatter about our friends, the Canadians, in the office hours chat, and I will save you all from that. You're welcome to go there if you want to get a giggle or two. And let's see. Thank you, Doug, for reminding me that Greg Stanton's district, which is the Arizona 4th congressional district, overlaps with a key targeted legislative district in Arizona, which is the House District 9. And that is a key swing district. So again, with a lot of the work all the work we're doing here at Progressive Victory, if you help one candidate at one level, you will absolutely be helping other candidates at other levels. And that is why we've targeted the places we have. And it's not just like we're just focusing on one candidate. It's the mentality very much is rising tides lift all boats, help elect all Democrats. There's a lot of work that we need to do. So thank you for pointing that out, Doug. We've just got a few minutes left.
I was going to jump in, Julie Lynn, and talk about LD 9. And I think, did you all do something with any of the LD 9 candidates in Arizona? Yes. So we're just going to plug. There are 3 really amazing Democrats running for the State House in LD 9. I know we've talked a lot about numbers tonight, but to put a human face on it, I will specifically call out Ava Birch, who is a nurse who is running for the state Senate. Highly encourage you to look her up. she shared a really personal story about access to reproductive care and why this issue is so important to her. And she is literally running for one of the seats that could make or break a majority in the Arizona State Senate and whether or not women can continue to access that care in the state. And then also Lorena Austin is really amazing community activist. Her family has been in Mesa, which is in part of the district, for over 100 years. And she is someone who I would really love to see be a state legislator. And if you go to EveryDistrict's website, another plug for our website, everydistrict.us, and go to our candidates page, we have bios for all of our candidates. So you can learn more about the folks that we are working with and, beyond the numbers, hear more of the stories of the people who are stepping up to run in these districts.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you, Nicole. So we have one last question that we're going to close on. And that is from our office hours chat. The question is, where can I learn more about Progressive Victory 22's candidates? Yes, love that question. So absolutely. So we have a website that we're just about to launch. Our candidates will be on there. Within that, if you go to the welcome section on the server, you'll see the how PV22 works. You'll also see action alerts and stream announcements. Stream announcements will be posting the various issues and the candidates we're working with. All of this is coming. Some of it's there, some of it's coming soon. So we will stay tuned. It's also a great reason why you should keep coming back to the server, checking out the events, staying tuned, and our goal is to provide you with a partner presentation like this once a week, because we want to help you learn more about the system that we're all living in. And so we're so grateful. In closing, we're so grateful to Nicole from EveryDistrict for joining us. Shout out to her and the work they're doing. You can visit their website at everydistrict.us. Please consider signing up to get her updates about candidates and important races and where you can have the biggest impact. And also, if you're able to, consider throwing them $5, $10, $50 once or every month or whatever you are so motivated to do so. And yes, our recruitment team here at Progressive Victory 22 is always working on more ways to get more people in the Discord to volunteer. And if you're even the tiniest bit interested, reach out to one of the moderators or someone on staff. We would love to help you figure that out. So, Nicole, in closing, anything you want to last words you want to share with us before you head out for the evening?
I'll just say thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun. I hope this was useful for you all and has convinced you about why state legislatures are so important. And if anyone has a follow-up question that I didn't get to, I am in the Discord, so you can find me under Nicole Hobbs and ask me questions. Or if you go to everydistrict.us, you'll see an email that you can reach out to me at.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks to our community manager, Emma Dearest. Thank you to Carl Pauls, our tech advisor. Thanks to Doug, not Duck, for helping out in the office hours chat, and to everyone else who's joined us this evening. We couldn't do this without you, and we will see you on the server. Have a great night, everyone. Bye-bye.